Hello, everybody. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about features in global projects. This is a very interesting issue because while there are many different industries that operate globally, they share very common characteristics, and these can be industries as diverse as film, as I talked about in my previous example, to finance, mineral exploitation, technology, any kind of industry that you can think of definitely has a way to go global or has a company that has gone global. And even though these industries are very different in nature, because these companies are global, they share very common characteristics, especially when they have global projects that they execute throughout a variety of different countries. For example, companies that operate globally have to be aware of different types of risks that are not present when companies just operate domestically. These types of risks include political risk because you have dozens of countries where you're operating, or even 20, 30 countries where you're operating, and they all have very different governments. They have different regulations. They have different political forces that affect the way that business is done within them. The same is true for laws. Any type of country has its own laws, and these laws all companies must abide by. But laws can be so different when it comes to different countries. So the law environment in Europe is completely different from the legal environment in Latin America or Africa. And this creates the necessity for global companies to have to constantly be aware of all types of political and legal risk when it comes to their operations. Aside from these types of risks, they all share the common risk of currency fluctuation because oftentimes, because they operate internationally and they operate in different countries, they must have to abide by the currency of that country. And that is inherently risky because you have different currencies, you have different fluctuations, and you have costs that might be spread out globally. And that will mean that at some point you will have either a devaluation or you will have a revaluation of a currency, and it's going to be very difficult to plan for. The same is true for legal and political risk. It's very difficult to plan ahead for these types of risks when you're in a global environment. But global companies must have strategies for all of this. Additionally, it is very important for companies that operate globally to be very aware of cultural differences that exist within the different places that they operate. And this is not just true for selling things in different countries, because of course different countries have very varied ways in which the people receive information in the way that marketing can be successful. But it's also about workers, and it's about the global talent and the way that performance is measured, or the way that employees expect their boss to treat them. It all varies very different. So global companies must have their own internal culture, but they must be very aware of cultural differences that exist within that organization and within the places that they operate. Additionally, and this is a very positive thing, because they're global companies, they have a global talent pool. And while this creates cultural differences, it also allows for great opportunities for hiring, not just because you have differences in pricing, for example, when it comes to labor forces, but also because you have access to every single worker that operates in these countries where you're operating. And this allows for better choice, and this allows for better development of talent globally. There's also currency fluctuation risk, and there is a diversity of ideas, the plethora of ideas that comes with having a global company and operating across different countries and operating throughout different cultures. And the reason for this is that global companies must have a worldview that is not just solidified within their corporate culture, but that is also very aware of all the different cultures that exist within the employees that operate in that company itself. And this means that global companies have to be more patient when it comes to their workers, and they have to be more aware of all the possible things that might make workers either feel uninterested with the company or feel more interested with it, and must be able to adhere to a lot of very different rules, regulations, and ideas that come from all over the world. Now, of course, these different features will vary wildly depending on the type of company, depending on the countries where they operate. But global companies do have in common that they all share not only the risks, but the opportunities that come from having the whole world as your market, basically, and having the opportunity to offset some damages that might happen in one place with gains that happen in another. And it's a true diversification of risk, but it creates more risk. So the more global you are, the more you have to be aware of all these types of risks, but the more opportunities you have to diversify yourself. Thank you.